to ask the choir of Bushenyi to come in front here. I would like to ask all of you, the people of Uganda, to stand up in respect to the dead. I would like the choir to sing for us the national anthem. Oh, Uganda, 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 we are going forward. Oh, Uganda, 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 we are going forward. Tanzania.
TV, it is a Pan-African Friday. My name is Jagen Asemakola Ziksoka. It is the 27th of May this year, 2022. Now that's just from the archives there, 1980 on this day when Dr. Apollo Milton Obote returned to Uganda. And well, that's very memorable to especially people who were here 42 years ago, and especially the surviving members of the Uganda People's Congress. Ndugu Akena is right now in Bushenyi, to my brother-in-law Luanga and all the others at Dola, the ideology head at the Congress there. Rachel, just a comment on that. I don't even want to know where you were, but welcome and good morning.
Good morning. I'm just surprised at your enthusiasm concerning UPC. I don't know. Yes. Where does your love come from? I don't know. It has a great history, of course, but unfortunately, things have been going the other way for a long time. It's a good way to get us to where we need to start today. Okay. It reminds us of the people who started this journey that we're going to discuss today.
Very important, and thank you so much, Rachel, for joining us today. Ndugu Rugarama, you remember that day, and you possibly were in Bushenyi. I'm only thinking, weren't you in Bushenyi?
I was a very young man, probably a baby, I think, when this return happened. But I see my uncle there, still a very energetic man. Chris Rwakasisi. I see the late Dr. Adonia Teberondwa, and quite a number of other people. Now, about UPC, if you indulge me, I think maybe we do not give it the respect that it deserves. But UPC is at the center of our independence as a country, and the spirit of the East African community, they have got a very big contribution. But at the same time, when you look at the relationship that the late Dr. Apollo Milton Obote had with the African leaders then, the likes of Kenneth Kaunda, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, among others, you get, and I think Jomo Kenyatta, you get the sense that here was a statesman. But of course, we say that, not that we are talking about a leadership that was not, was free of blemish, because I must admit that we also had some divisive politics and, which were tagged to religion, because around that time, a Catholic would be identified as belonging to the Democratic Party. Then Anglican would be UPC. And from the Pan-African angle, where I come from, I don't think that was healthy. But certainly, there is a very big and firm foundation that UPC set immediately after merging with Kabaka Yeka for this country. And there was a permeation of kind of influence that Dr. Bote spread to the neighbors, which was a good feeling that brought the spirit of Pan-Africanism in a manner of speaking. So I do remember this day. And I think we must integrate a lot of the aspects that were in the UPC 1 and 2 to our present day politics, discard those aspects which we deem not necessary, but at the same time borrow, integrate for purposes of advancing our politics and development, those aspects which certainly were embedded in the UPC leadership into our modern leadership for purposes of homogeneous accommodation of everybody. Maybe just to end by saying that I regret that the vibrancy and the vibrancy that UPC had, the kind of products it produced, the likes of Dr. Hakana Rugunda from their youth academies. When you look at them now, when you look at the UPC, current UPC, you see that it is fundamentally different from the other UPC.
Of those days,
of those days.
Years.
But of course, there are a number of reasons which I do not have the time to go into now. I think you just allowed me a few seconds to, in relation to this.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, coming back to the conversation, but just before we get into our conversation today, the Omoro by-election, what did we learn from that? Because we, many thought maybe we would have what we saw in Kayunga between Nakwede and Mwonge, and I think we sailed through peacefully, and we should just accept the outcomes of the election or something, Rachel. About Omoro, just before we deviate from Omoro was yesterday, and so the constituency, now called Omoro County in Omoro District, has got a member of parliament taking over from the late Jacob Olanya.
Concerning Omoro, I don't know whether it's just me, but my sense is that there's heightened and almost grievous voter apathy. I did not get the impression that the people of Omoro were excited about this election. I don't get the impression that they felt the need to participate. There was an excuse that was roundly bandied about, talking about people are spending time in their gardens. If you've been up country, you know that people go very early, and by mid-morning they're done. If the people of Omoro wanted to vote in numbers, they had sufficient time to have done so. In other words, there were reports of few people compared to the number of voters that could have been there. It seems to me, I don't know what the reason could have been, but there was no, the by-election never gathered steam. It never really made it to the hearts and minds of the people of Omoro. It seemed to me that they chose to let it alone. And I don't know what the reasons could have been, but it's very clear to me that they had time to have populated these polling stations. They had time to have expressed themselves, but they chose to keep their peace. And it's an unsettling peace. It's not the kind of peace that is out of conviction. It seems to be that they were expressing resignation. Like I said, I really don't know why, but they chose not to participate, largely speaking.
Nduguru Garama, in just 1 minute on Omoro.
I want to look at the statistics, the registered voters, and those who turned out to cast their vote. That will inform me about the resignation and despair and the fatigue. Then I can intelligently make a conclusion about the voter apathy.
That's what you're talking about.
But just to say, this when you look at the disparity between, in terms of votes, the votes that were cast in favor of our current now MP elect is, what is the name again? Oranya
Ojok Olanyi.
Ojok. And the second runners up,
Simon Tolit.
it is such a huge thing. I do not know what exactly happened in between there, because an election is not just an event, but it was also a by-election. So there was a short time. I congratulate the young man. NRM has just filled the place which it should have filled, and we can discuss the aftermath of the house.
Well, thank you very much. And now let's just get to our conversation. On Wednesday this week, we celebrated the Africa Liberation Day. It happens every 25th of May every year. And of course, we had the celebrations on Wednesday. In Kampala, in Uganda, we had celebrations here. Of course, there was a march to create awareness of what is happening, and just thanking all the people who participated, the Pan-African movement in this country, and quite a number of people who wish and who love Africa and, of course, are for the cause of Africa. Now, away from that, we just, of course, want to talk about what we saw or what happened on that particular day, and specifically looking at the theme of this year's celebrations, which, of course, was looking at nutrition, food security as a defense, or for the defense of people. And now joining us today for a conversation are two other panelists, and I will start by introducing Comrade KD, who is right now in the United States of America, and of course he is always with us here. KD is a Pan-Africanist and of course also an author, and so passionate about this continent of Africa. Once again, welcome Comrade KD to the conversation. Is your gadget unmuted? Is your gadget unmuted? Oh, KD, could you just unmute your gadget?
Okay, and let me do this once again. I send my greetings to each and every one of you. Got to remember, hit that last button before we speak. It is a joy once again to be within this illustrious panel as we commemorate the ongoing celebration of African Liberation Day. It is an honor to be in this circle.
Joining us, and good morning from wherever you are. And of course, joining us again is Winnie Ogweno, and Winnie is the president of the Pan-African Women Movement in Kenya. She's a Pan-Africanist also in Kenya. Winnie, please, could you also come to the conversation? Good morning from wherever you are in Kenya. Let's see you and let's hear your voice. Unmute your gadget. Unmute your gadget. We can't hear you. We can't hear you. Just unmute your gadget. We need to get your voice.
Thank you so much.
Very good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we now can hear you.
A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great privilege to speak to my comrades in Uganda, and greetings to Uganda, a beautiful nation, and Comrade Rugarama. Good to have you, and good to have a discussion to you this morning. Looking forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just because you're in Kenya, our neighbors are getting into elections in less than 75 days. Just right there, yesterday we saw at the prayer breakfast, Comrade Ruto and the president, the outgoing president, Muigai Kenyatta, shaking hands, and of course Ruto inviting on running mate for Raila Odinga, Mama Martha Karua, to also come and say something and the events. In just about 2-3 minutes, give us a situation about Kenya, and of course the Kenya Chagua heat that we are onto before 9th of August this year.
We are very peaceful right now as a nation, and of course having His Excellency the President with the Comrade Raila Odinga, and having Martha Karua appointed as running mate as women of the country. We are very excited, and it's a Winnie Mandela moment in Kenya. And all the women in the country, of course, very happy to have Martha Karua on board, and looking forward to what Martha can offer to the country. And we've seen Martha transversing the country and trying to campaign and lobby and to show that she can stand strong as a born one, with other fellow women in the country, trying to campaign to make sure that we have, for the first time, maybe a woman deputy president in the country. And we also have Ruto with his comrade Gachagua trying to lobby and convince Kenyans, and a lot of campaign. The more emotions are a bit high now in campaigns for the campaigns in Kenya, but too much peace, and we expect a peaceful election in the country, and the best candidate will definitely take the day. But the fact the political literacy in Kenya right now is so high. Kenyans are very literate, and they know the repercussions of the side effects of very unpeaceful election and everything. So we are very sober right now. We hope to choose the best candidate and may the best candidate win. And as we preach about peace and love for our neighbors and for our country, and just to ensure this election process goes on smoothly without any, cause of commotion, because, we are also a center of the East African community and an economic, great impact in the economic space in the East African community. So we hope that the elections are going to be peaceful. Our leaders are preaching peace. Comrade Raila is preaching peace. Comrade Ruto is preaching peace. And we just look forward to a peaceful election at the end of the day.
Thank you.
So far, so good. Nothing much in the country.
Thank you very much, Winnie, for that. And of course, yesterday I was listening to Deputy President Samuel Ruto, and of course making all the commitments that it's going to be a peaceful process, and they commit themselves to being to do a peaceful election and end it peacefully, and that there should be nothing. The results shall be accepted, whichever way they come. Yes. And this is a very good commitment, of course, from the leaders. But is it the same thing with us, the voters? Because the leaders might be talking about peace, 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 like in Sisi at the grassroots, hate speech, and of course all those other things. Are these the same players? Are these the same attitudes that the Wananchi in Kenya have, away from what the leaders are preaching?
The Wananchi of Kenya right now are very literate politically, okay, and very mature politically, because they've been there, seen that. We've been through a lot, if you know the political history of Kenya. So we've been through a lot, and the repercussions of every elections, somehow it's the common Wananchi who end up having the, bearing all the burdens, you understand? And so right now, Kenyans are very much mature. And if you listen to the people in the ground, everywhere you go, the Wananchi are saying, you know what, whoever takes the day, takes the day. All we want is a government, and we hope the government will be able to take care of our interests. But we are not going to the streets. We are not going to riot. We are not going to do anything and ruin our economy because of something. Most of the common Wananchi are right now praying for embracing handshakes. And I don't think Kenyans will even have an issue if Odinga and Ruto had a handshake, as long as the economy is doing well and we are moving on as a nation. I think right now the Kenyan voter is very politically mature, and I don't see this happening in the country.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And of course, we thank you so much for that in Kenya. We are looking at Kenya, we are watching Kenya, and we'll be in Kenya. We will come to Kenya, we'll be in Kenya, we'll participate in that election, and we pray that it goes well, and we pray that the leaders commit to what they said. We need a peaceful election, of course, for the good of Kenya and, of course, the East African community and the rest of Africa. Thank you. Now we'll get to the conversation. That's Winnie now in Kenya this morning. She's the president of the Pan-African Women Congress in Kenya. Joining us in this conversation, and of course, Obi Kedi, another Pan-Africanist, also in the United States. Kedi, we'll start with you, I think. Set us rolling, because you've authored a very good book of the blackest soils. Talk to us about the theme of this year's African Liberation Day that talks about nutrition and food security. Now, this is one of the things that we are grappling with. When you look at a continent, when you look at Africa, the arable land that we have, and the good soils, the good weather, etc. But yet again, it's one continent that is also struggling with nutrition. It's a continent that's struggling with food and food security and all the food security systems that we have. Speak to us, Ndugu Kedi, about what you think the leadership needs to do in our generation to ensure that there is a defense for our people, and nobody uses food as a weapon against us.
This is such a wonderfully important topic, and of course, this is a topic that coincides absolutely with the idea of the Africa Rising narrative, as well as Africa now being possessing of the world's great population growth, which spells to be the demographic dividend. Yet it is really quite paradoxical. that Africa, a continent, 55 nations, has some 2.160 billion acres, 874 hectares of arable land, 60% of which is not being utilized at this particular point, and much of that it is utilized is underutilized because of lack of certain critical inputs. Africa has 60% of the world's unused arable land. Africa has an abundance of waters, hydroelectric potential for both the energy, which is a critical input when it comes to the entirety of the food value chain. Africa also, because of its demographic dividend, has the human capital necessary to unleash a dynamic growth on any sector where the human capital would be committed. And we do know that in many African nations, as many as 70% of the population are involved in some form of agriculture. So why, with all of these great world-class advantages, is Africa still a net food importer, when in actuality, according to the research that I put in my book, The Blackest Soil, Africa Can Feed the World, Africa has the potential to develop a food export potential by the year 2050 of some 4.3 trillion US dollars annual export. Now, when we're talking about the implementation of agroeconomics at that scale, there is no problem with youth unemployment within Africa. Of course, employing and building economy and export economy at that scale is not dependent upon the handhold. We need to create or to have technology transfers, technology development, the education for modern day farming methodologies. And I would say there are a couple of more things that are very critical that if we are not paying attention, will get out of our control very soon, and it will be very difficult to wrestle back this territory. One is right now the integrity of African seeds must be the highest priority. We do know that several international corporations such as Monsanto Bayer, they are in partnership with the German Bayer Corporation, Dow Chemical, Union Carbide, and a number of others are attempting to control the world's seed stocks. And when they talk about certified seeds being grown on African soils as the next stage of the development and resolution of some of these ongoing food crises, I question the word certified. Who is certifying the seeds? Do we as Pan-Africans have our own autonomous systems for seed certification, soil certification, for certification of organic, for global export? At present, we lack these facilities. And with the newly proposed African Development Bank $1.5 billion facility to expand African agricultural competence over the short run, I, for one, strongly suggest, and I've prepared myself to be able to actually accomplish this, I listed this in the book, strongly suggest that we need to have our own autonomous laboratories certifying that the quality of inputs and the quality of our exports and our outputs matched at the highest standards certified anywhere in the world.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Katie, and I think that's a very good submission just right there. Let me go to Winnie in Kenya. Winnie, come to the conversation now. We know that in this particular term that is ending for President Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and Deputy President William Samoei Ruto, they came on with the Big Four agenda, and one of these was, of course, agriculture. Look at agriculture, and because we know that Kenya is one of the countries that also struggles a lot with food. Now, just looking at food, nutrition, and of course, using it as a defense for our people, speak to us about that, because we just trust that you are in a very good position to talk about this topic from Kenya, where you are, because we know that there's not even enough food in your country.
I think, first of all, as we've heard from Comrade, when he says that Africa has the right demographic population to, go into agriculture. But the first question is interest. Do they have the interest? You understand? Because at the end of the day, the population is wired towards the whole 844 system, the Kenyan system of education and getting white-collar jobs. And to the youth, who are the majority of the country, Their interest is the white collar job. Nobody is sensitizing the youth on the importance of agriculture, on the importance of a kitchen garden. Nobody has interest. We don't do kitchen gardens anymore. We don't have the passion, you understand? So if we are the majority of the population in Kenya, and we don't have the passion for agriculture, then who is in agriculture? Let's start from that's one. We have enough policies in Kenya that can help us improve our agricultural sector. We have enough innovative ideas and you know and policies and structures, well put structures in the country. But one problem is interest. Let's start from there. The president has done as much as he can, but also we've been experiencing, let's say, drought and shortage of rain in some of the arid and semi-arid areas of Kenya, where we've had, like in February 2022, we had about 3.1 billion of the Kenyan population suffering from food insecurity in the country. But the government is doing its best to ensure that we have enough, maybe water supply for irrigation in some of these areas, and food supply in the area. But what we lack in the country is to go to the common wananchi, sensitize them on these innovative agricultural practices, sensitize the youth on the importance of agriculture, have a whole day forum of, let's say, our leaders, presidents, governors, and MPs holding conferences on agriculture, because it is the backbone of the country, it's the weapon of the country. If the Kenyan population is hungry, then we have nothing to do. We have a very efficient population, even for the success of the nation. So the president and his deputy have done the best they can do for the country, but also we also have to work so hard to ensure that the majority of the population, of the Kenyan population, or the youth, are interested in agriculture.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Coming back to studios, Rachel, let's get to that conversation here. You notice that we talk about agriculture, and from Winnie's submission in Kenya, she also says that yes, all of us agree that agriculture is a backbone. Nobody does not want to talk about agriculture, and of course we give statistics every other day about how we live on agriculture and about how the biggest chunk of our population lives on agriculture, and quite a number of things. Can our governments take on agriculture and not just leave it for just the people to say, well, 70–80% of the people live on agriculture, doing whatever subsistence agriculture in that manner? What can the governments do that own agriculture and to take it up as a security affair, just like we do all the others, infrastructure development, security, education, etc.?
I'm of the opinion that state thinking needs to really be revisited. You see, the African state of today, post-colonial that is, began with the foundation that cannot allow for prioritization of agriculture. In the initial stages of the post-colonial era, the governments were obsessed with the liberation to free themselves from the colonial hold, and thereafter neocolonialism. And then, of course, they talked about the next stage was to talk about territorial integrity and sovereignty and independence. For the first 40 years of the post-colonial state, and I'm talking very much in the context of the Organization of African Unity, because it was formed in the beginning stages of the freedom, if you will, of where we are at this time. But those first 40 years until it was transformed into another organization, which is AU, in 2002. That was the focus. The focus was political. It's only beginning in 2002 that African governments came to realization that political matters alone and military matters alone cannot propel a government from where it is to where it needs to go. In other words, it's just the last 20 years since the AU took center stage as the leading forum for African leaders to meet yearly that we have begun to address seriously the question of economic progress, the question of development. And that is why we lost time for the first almost 50 years since many of our states got independent. Of course, not all of them. South Africa is not one of those. And Zimbabwe, but the ones that got or began their political drive to self-governance in the 50s and 60s. By the time AU became something else, we had been doing things in a way that cannot take us to the next level for at least 50 years. What I'm trying to say is that since the AU recognized that if we don't do something about integrating our thought processes as governments, if we don't do something about speeding up integration on every level, not just political, not just monetary, but economic and social and so on and so forth, we will never have the kind of capital we need to compete on the international stage. So the formulation of the kind of policies and the agreement on the way Africa must move forward is yet to reach a consensus. Those things, or the policies, the mechanisms, the resources, from my point of view, have not been meaningfully committed. They have not even been decided upon. Someone was talking about the gentleman, the one in America. Obi, Kedi. He was talking about the fact that the potential is raw. The potential is awesome. It is so. But I don't think that sufficient energy has been put into how do we move from where we are as a bloc. Moving as individual countries is still very much at the core of African thinking. Moreover, the individual economies are entirely too small to make a difference on the continent. So you are saying what should be done. What should be done is to commit ourselves totally, fully, and completely concerning how there will be a uniform and homogeneous approach to developmental issues. In other words, it should not be just SADC. It should not be just East African Community. It should not be just ECOWAS. There should be a meeting of the minds concerning if, in fact, there are regions, for example, that have an advantage in agriculture terms, and those ones exist. The Sahel countries cannot be said to be those ones with a lot of arable land. But there are other places in this continent where that is so. So those kinds of discussions concerning what part of Africa, for example, should be encouraged or even equipped to become the kind of breadbasket that it could become. Those discussions have not reached the level where we can actually take advantage of the resources we have on the ground, in my view.
Well, thank you so much. Ndugu Rugarama, in 2003, we had the Maputo Protocol that proposed a 10% in our national budgets for agriculture. 20 years later, I do not think there's a government on the continent that signed to that protocol that has actually fulfilled that. In 2014, we made the same commitments at the Malabo in Equatorial Guinea. And I don't think we even have any country that has moved there. Now, you know, when you read all these documents and all these proposals from our leaders, the heart is actually willing, the spirit is willing, but something is failing them. And
the body is weak.
The body is weak, but the spirit is willing. You know, when you read the documents, you really see very willing spirits, but the bodies are very weak to actually help us get there. How would we be where we are today? You heard from Kedi here talk about the seeds themselves. We have virtually taken away what belongs to us and brought in what we even do not know. But how would a continent that has 2.16 billion acres with a population that is just half of the acreage that we have starve, go without food, and have people dying of hunger?
Thank you so much, Comrade Jagenda. Where are we coming from? I want to approach this topic and derive it from the theme of African Union during the celebrations which have just been concluded, the Africa Liberation Day. The African Union, in conjunction with the USA and the Department of Agriculture, were at the center stage of commemorating the Africa Liberation Day, and the conversation was about nutrition, and food security. A number of panel discussions were held, and they were pointing to the forthcoming Marabo meeting of heads of state. You mentioned Marabo. The African Liberation Day, if you will permit me, is a day which falls on the 25th of May, and it was a precursor to the African Organization of African Union, and now the African Union. The purpose of the African Liberation Day was and still is to take stock of the social, political, and economic gains that Africa, since the liberation from the shackles of direct colonialism, has achieved. It is from there that you observe that this day, the African Liberation Day, which is a bit sad, is celebrated or as a national day where every business is linked to that day by less than 16 countries on that particular day, where they say this is a time when we should reflect seriously on the achievements and the challenges that the African countries have experienced since the quote-unquote departure of the colonialist, because I do not believe that he actually left. Now, we are about, if my mathematics serves me right, 54 or 55 independent countries on the African continent, but less than 16 countries actually do celebrate Africa Liberation Day. Now, what is pretty annoying there is that, and this is our mission now as a Pan-African movement, that even Uganda does not observe the 25th of May as a public holiday. It is only countries like Zimbabwe, Ghana, and that form the 16 or less on the African continent, which observe that day. Now, I want to mention something, that a public holiday is not for purposes of going around or taking a walk in the leisure park, but majority of these days, the true meaning of a public holiday, and in this particular case of Africa Liberation Day, is to reflect critically about what you have been able to achieve as a country, and as a region, and as a continent, and where you have experienced challenges, and devise means of how to overcome those challenges. Now, coming back to the nutrition and food security as a defense for the African people. Africa, although in some areas, in some books, is estimated to have about 60% of her land as arable. I want to put that figure at well above 69% of African land being able, without using fertilizers, to sustain agriculture. Africa is a net importer of food. And Comrade Jagenda and our dear viewers and listeners, I want you to hear me out clearly, so that we can together reason and look at where the problem is, and probably we devise means on how to overcome some of these challenges. Between the year, well, let me just put it that annually, Africa imports in the range of 40 to 45, and these are statistics that were just released on 25th of May by African Union. Africa imports, who is a net importer of food, in the region of 40 to 45 billion dollars. You have to look at that. The African Development Bank has merely put aside, and my brother Kaidi mentioned it, and I trust that brain. Kaidi has done a lot of work in this area.
Exactly,
So
yes.
it is no mistake that a such big broadcaster like UBC calls upon him to share his views with the rest of the population in Uganda and beyond. Merely put aside 1.5 to 1.7, I think, billion dollars for nutrition and agriculture for purposes of buffer stock. That's very little money. And we must therefore, that tells you about investment in agriculture. There has been a known fact that Africa forms the youngest population. We have a very young population, and I think Uganda in particular, for instance, possesses the second youngest population, young people, I think, in the world, if my memory again serves me right. But at the same time, Uganda also, so it is said, is the second largest producer of organic. Organic, even when there is use of these chemicals that
the GMOs.
We do not know where they come from. But what is critical there is that what is ascribed to us, because I took my time and listened to the conversation on the 25th of May, Africa Liberation Day, from the African Union. We have the following as the impediments: that there has been drastic climate change. Our climate is on a very serious negative decline, even when it is a well-known fact that Africa is the least emitter of the hazardous produces of hazardous products that affect the ozone layer and the environment. It is also listed that we are suffering nutrition and food security issues because of the instability on the African continent. I agree. When you look at IGAD, the figures are that where there is instability, because we have got cases of Southern Sudan, we have got cases of Chad, we have got cases of DRC, we have got cases of Somalia, parts of Ethiopia. And when you take stock, you realize that all these areas we are talking about are politically unstable. Now, in a situation where you have got instability, you are not going to cater properly for the nutrition and the food security of your people. There is also something else that came up, and it has been loudly talked about by the members that converged and were discussing the nutrition and food security. And this is they persistently called it Russian aggression in Ukraine. I choose to call it the intermeddling of NATO in the affairs which they could have let the normal circumstances prevailing to continue. But I don't want to go political. Let me restrict myself to nutrition and food security. They say that we have got a lot of ships on the, especially in the Black Sea, and which is a fact, which are still not able to deliver food to the destinations, especially on the African continent, because of the circumstances obtaining in Ukraine. And that as a consequence of the activities in Ukraine, the prices of especially commodities to do with food have shot up. There was a scare even before the war started. But now that the war actually started, the prices are so much high. Now, is also a claim that there is less investment in the area of nutrition and agriculture, and I agree. Okay. There is also claim that we suffer nutrition and food security because we do not have proper data. Data has been very critical, and it is at the heart. As a farmer, you know that you must monitor the cow. If the cow has been giving you between 25 to 28 liters per day, and it cuts 17, you must have that data captured so that you can go back and work out the reasons as to why and how you can improve. Now, Africa has been suffering from lack of proper records. Now, when you do not have proper records, it is very difficult for you to carry out research retrogressively and be able to project
for the future,
how the future is going to be. Permit me just say two things, and I conclude on this. And you do realize that I have even not gone into the real depth of some of the points which I have highlighted to our viewers. There is a problem of post-harvest.
Post-harvest, yes.
Now, the post-harvest, we do not have, we used to have very good technology, but somehow the technology has gotten lost somewhere, and we seem to be losing between 20 to 25, scaling now to 30%.
Actually, according to FAO, it's now 40%.
Of the value of our produce.
It's 40%.
That is alarming.
Yeah, very alarming.
If you lose, even if by the way it was 10%, that is extremely high.
That's what we lost. That's what we lose at post-harvest.
There you go. So we suffer malnutrition because we do not also have good elaborate systems where we monitor the food value chain. There is also a problem of distribution that on African continent, and I think this was said by the Commissioner of Science, the African Union, and Health, where you find that there is plenty of food, for instance, in Uganda, but we cannot go to Ethiopia easily and deliver that food. Actually, if you look at it this way, and I want to conclude with this point, if we are having intra-trade between ourselves, and I think that is what informs the creation of Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we would be in a better position to fight this, because Rachel talked about that we cannot compare, and I agree, we cannot compare countries on the African continent in terms of weather and ultimately climate. It is true, but we must realize that it is not a must like Gaddafi had done, because he stays, probably his country was in a worse situation than Egypt, which is importing 80% of its wheat from Ukraine, which produces 30% with Russia of the cereals and wheat in particular on the European and African market. But but Libya had managed to solve the problem of food and nutrition. In the same way, therefore, if we can work on the design, the trade design, the ability of connectivity to be able to transport food from, say, Africa, I mean Uganda or Tanzania, immediately to Ethiopia and Uganda, Sudan, would, I think, in my opinion, would actually do away with the estimated malnourished who are estimated to be on the African continent about 40 million, because even malnourishment, sorry, malnourishment is at the levels. There are those who are completely malnourished, and there are those who are mildly malnourished. And on the African continent, it goes to 100 plus. That's what is estimated. Those who are starving, not starving so much. So I want to say, in conclusion, that we should emphasize the intra-trade on the African continent in the meantime, in the short run, because I know with advancement in technology, whereby we are able to harness the sun, for instance, for purposes of irrigation, we will realize that the issue of food security and nutrition is going to be sorted out, because it is one of the biggest weapons of defense against an enemy. Okay. And that is what Kaidi was talking about. Take away our organic original seeds, deliver the same to Monsantos, you are finished as a continent.
Thank you, Ndugu Comrade Rugarama. Kaidi Obi, I just know you're still with us, and of course following the conversation you've heard from the ladies and from Comrade Rugarama here in studios. To you there, is that Winnie? Okay, well, Kaidi, coming to just right there, you notice that African presidents and African governments made a commitment in what they call the Abuja Declaration on Health. And it was a good discussion that we raised our budgets for health to about 15%. Not so many honored that commitment, giving several reasons, until COVID came into the country and we noticed and realized how feeble and how fragile our health systems were. We scampered, we struggled to ensure that we build and make health systems to be able to manage the shock of COVID-19. Are we waiting for a shock in agriculture for us to think investing in agriculture, for us to think doing all the things? Ndugu Rugarama said quite a number of things in here, which I want to draw your attention to, especially post-harvest handling. When you look at a country like Uganda that has about 50% of the arable land in East Africa, we only utilize just about only 35% of 100. And the other challenge that we have on the continent, not only in Uganda, but on the continent of Africa where we do agriculture, is we leave it to the smallholders. These are the backbone and these are the majority. Looking at that and the scenario and the realities on ground, you're so passionate about agriculture. What do you think our leaders need to do to ensure that we don't have to wait for a COVID in agriculture for us to think that we need to improve on our food systems?
I must say, Comrade, your questions are very powerful and imply undeniably we could do much better than we have been doing. I suggest we have been too reactive. And when we do come up with these brilliant, insightful, proactive schemes, too often we're dependent upon external components to assure that our own self-designed schemes will be implemented, or too often we get distracted. I have recently, about 40 days ago, returned from my 4th trip to the East African communities. I do include a trip to Ethiopia as the East African community. As we know, they have applied to join the EAC, just as the DRC has now been welcomed into the East African community. And there were some very powerful observations that I returned with And I'm reminded once again how Kenya and Uganda are both vying for my heart, which state will ultimately capture my body. And I'm going to do my best to share my spirit between the two states. But several very, very important inputs. And I want to thank the guests. I listened very careful as Professor Dr. Rugarama laid out such powerful information across such a broad spectrum. I'm tempted to respond to his brilliant points, but we don't have that kind of time. I did make a few notes. Number one, we have to also include in Africa's pursuit of optimized food production, distribution, storage, post-production, and the elimination of such a high percentage of food spoilage, which the last time I checked was some 30% of African crops spoil before getting to the market. And this results in over 100 billion US dollars of food wastage every year on the continent. Cutting that by 50% would allow 50 billion more dollars now to go back into the inputs that make the entirety of the food value chain function, including post-harvest production for export. But several very important points. I think that the role of African traditional medicine needs to also be emphasized just as powerfully as African food production, and especially organic food production. One of the highlights of my trip to Kenya was working with a brilliant young sister who is the founder of Harriet's Botanicals, doing traditional African medicine. And when I toured the facility in Nairobi, I was just blown away by this one woman's efforts. Of course, she had a brilliant team she had put together, and I look forward to collaborating more with them and hopefully being an important part of their global exports. I'm reminded of the statement, I believe the statement goes back to about 2017, from the brilliant president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, when he made the statement, the next generation of millionaires and billionaires from Africa will be farmers. Our task now is to transform the small shareholder into bigger players in the integrity, productivity, and the gross domestic output of the African food value chain. Very important points I want to make here, and this might be somewhat controversial. That food insecurity should not be blamed on the East European Union conflict. This doesn't sound very appropriate to me. The fuel shortage as well, which we know is crippling. While I was in Kenya, the food shortage was crippling the nation with hours and hours of wait in petrol stations for fuel that was just being withheld from the distribution. And so this fuel shortage, food and energy inflation, I don't think that they should be blamed on these temporal things, just as the pandemic recession that is going on. Now we have the food and energy recession is being sown. Again, we are in a reactive position when in actuality we should be seeing these things coming into being. I am, as you know, a scientific futurist. I'm following after the brilliant footprints of the Kenyan-born Dr. Callistus Juma, praise be his eternal name. And I've accepted that mantle as probably the premier scientific futurist of African lineage that exists in the world today. So we have to get ahead. Africa is still far too vulnerable to external machination and manipulation. I am terming this a nouveau colonialism. This goes beyond direct colonialism, liberal colonialism, neo-colonialism. This nouveau colonialism, I believe, is for the benefit of multinational corporations profiteering off of our vulnerabilities. And they did pick us as early as 2014 because of our demographic dividend. They picked us as the fastest growing consumer market in the world. I'm talking about continental Africans. And we need to appreciate that potential more so than just being exploited by the nouveau colonials. A couple more important points I want to make here. There is a new leadership that's coming into play. I have grown really quite fond of the third generation of African national leaders that has come up. The first generation, of course, in the immediate aftermath of decolonization, too many of them were unprepared. Many of their national governments were not educated to run complex government affairs. We saw a second generation, mainly military strongmen, overthrowing the weaker of the first generation. And of course, the military strongmen were strong enough, educated enough to overthrow a government, but not strong enough and educated enough to run complex governments themselves. So we saw then a whole cascade of these military overthrows. But now we see a third generation who were well educated. Many of them do not have a background in military infrastructure, as was the generation before them. And I'm not putting down all of those military leaders. We saw some brilliant ones, such as great Thomas Sankara, rose out of this environment. We do see a very strong, sustained development of Uganda after His Excellency President Museveni himself emerged from this military background into the political arena. But there is a new generation that's arising. And I think leaders such as Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, we do see John Magufuli, praise be his eternal name, from Tanzania, emerging on the backs of a different type of educated, highly educated, sensitive, internationalist, and Pan-African leadership. And I suggest that we are seeing the birth of a fourth generation of Pan-African leadership, a generation that is born, that has been built upon their comprehension of sustainable development, technical innovation, of resilient systems, and self-engineered sustainable infrastructure growth. And so this fourth generation, I'm really excited about seeing them come into this narrative we call Africa Rising. So when you ask me, what is it that some of the leaders can do to facilitate this Africa Rising narrative to the year 2050 and continental unity? Two things. Number one, look very closely at the East African Community model. It is a brilliant model for creating what will be the fifth largest nation in the world population-wise. And when Ethiopia joins the East African Federation, along with Somalia, once it's stabilized, this will be the formation of the world's third largest nation population-wise, the seventh largest nation in the world insofar as geography, and with the resources across the East African community to include the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the potential for a superpower state is unlimited. So I would say, African leaders, keep your countries, keep our countries on a solid developmental track. We've got to rule out and eliminate the selfishness and corruption that has plagued us. I did get a chance while in Nairobi to spend time with a great articulate Professor PLO Lumumba, who we do know has struggled, along with Mo Ibrahim and others, to remove corruption from African self-governance. We must keep this pattern up. We must keep this trend, and we must support the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and the PLO Lumumba Foundation for their efforts in this field. And lastly, look to the young people. One of the greatest observations I had in being in Kenya, I live in the United States. I am an elder, even though I look young. The median age in the United States is 40.1 years. When I go to Kenya, the median age of the nation is 20.1 years. It was so beautiful being in a nation of so many dynamic, brilliant, and better educated young women, young men. They're doing great things. So we really can focus and feed that dynamic. Let's stop being so reactive to things that are happening in the European Union and the United States and in other parts of the planet. Africa needs to be essentially selfish when it comes to sustainable development. I think we stand right on the cusp of something so brilliant. It will shine a light on this planet that is not known for as many as 2,600 years. Obviously, you can tell I'm very excited about this Africa Rising narrative and the pending East African Federation.
Thank you very much. Kate, you've made it very clear there. And just before I let you go and come back to studios here, That is what you see about East Africa. You've made very good conclusions there about this region. Is that what the leaders see about East Africa? Is that what we, the people in East Africa, see about East Africa? And secondly, we talk about agriculture, but you notice that this potential of the young Africans in this rising Africa, we are all preoccupied now by the fourth industrial revolution, the fifth industrial revolution, and of course, not looking at agriculture, because where we come from, agriculture is not a thing of the youth today. This generation detests, and agriculture is actually an abomination to them. We do not want to think in agriculture. We're thinking IT, we're thinking about all the other things. What do you think needs to be done for us to appreciate and embrace what you are actually talking about, KD?
I am writing a book. I'm actually writing 2 new books to add to the 42 published books that I have. One coming out next month will be another book of my food, my recipes. And then in July, 5 months before the release of the follow-up to the Black Panther movie, I am releasing a book entitled Futurenomics 2.0, The Wakanda Future versus the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Without going too deep into this branch of this conversation, because I have some very radical ideas on what this fourth industrial revolution really means and why we, from the position of African young people, should be resisting of artificial intelligence, transhumanism, and these other things that are going on. But I would suggest that we are on the potential of something tremendous. But at this time, more so than any other time ever in history, we have to be selfish about our civilization. We have to be very bold about claiming, yes, we are Africans, yes, we matter in the world, but this is who we are. We are not defined by Bretton Woods. We're not defined by the Washington consensus or the Beijing consensus. We are not defined by the nasty, mean-spirited propaganda that puts a new outbreak of a skin disease that is transmitted by rats. They call it monkeypox. And in every story on monkeypox, they always put pictures of African people in those stories, despite the fact that monkeypox is not anything that's exciting African epidemiologists. So we've got a lot of good, strong, hard work before us. I can't wait to get back to Kampala and Nairobi and Mombasa and Addis Ababa and do the best that I can to roll up my sleeves. Now, this next trip I'm coming, I'm going to bring a lot more people who think and invest and develop and research and build systems just as I do, because I would like to think that we across the diaspora have a very powerful role to play. Yet then again, I'll be honest, I'm still trying to convince my diaspora-born brothers and sisters that they do mean something in the future of Africa and the world.
Thank you very, very, very much. Rachel, let's come back to you here. I don't know whether Winnie is still with us. Winnie had actually had a network problem.
I'm with you.
Oh, thank you very much, Winnie.
I'm with you.
Thank you, Winnie.
Yes.
Welcome to the conversation. I think you've heard from the 3 gentlemen and, of course, the lady in studios here. And we
Yes.
talk about Africa's potential. We talk about Africa and, of course, the pride that we have about the youth. When you come to Kenya, it's the youth. When you come to Uganda, it's the youth. When you go to Africa, it's the youth. Now, one of the things that all of us are talking about is value addition. But the question is, do we even have enough production that we think adding value to?
Yes, we have enough production. And I heard from Comrade Rugarama talking about the post-harvest. How do we handle the post-harvest in, let's say, in East Africa? It has been a big challenge in East Africa, especially with our brothers in South Sudan, where we have a lot of agricultural produce, we have a lot of mangoes, we have a lot of avocados, we have a lot of fruits, vegetables that are rotting in South Sudan. And this is because of the post-harvest. Like Comrade Rugarama said, we lose over 30% post-harvest. That is one of the key challenges. And another thing is, as the East African community, we should try to work on the infrastructure. We are working on the northern and the southern corridor, Southern Gauge Railway. And I think the East African governments should come together to ensure that we work on the the northern and southern corridor transport, to make sure we have efficient transport within the region for us to be able to access the agricultural produce from, let's say, the ones we have in Sudan that are going to waste, and try to maybe preserve them somewhere in Uganda, in Kenya, so that we as Africa, we have a pool where we can put our produces that can help us to sustain ourselves and our semi-arid and arid areas. That's one. Number two, we must appreciate that as East African countries, we are blessed differently. Some of us are blessed with water and others are blessed with land, vast land, fertile land. And we also must, as we talk about food security, we should also appreciate the blue economy. What is the blue economy offering to the food security, and how are we managing our marine sector? Comrade Rugarama spoke about blue economy, and how are we managing our oceans? Are they clean? The acidity in the oceans, is there proper structure and policies that making sure that our oceans and waters and lakes are clean in the country for fishery, for us to manage the fishery sector in the region? That's one. And also, we must appreciate that different governments have tried so much to make sure that we have proper food security in the countries. In my country, I think we have proper budget allocations for agriculture from the national government back to the roots in the county governments in Kenya. But like Comrade Cade said, the cancer that is eating Africa is corruption. How do we then follow up? Because the national government has played its part. Let's say the Kenyan government has allocated 60 billion for agriculture, and every county has a budget for agriculture. What is the Department of Agriculture in that particular county doing to ensure that there is food security in that particular county? Are we following up are we doing proper audits to make sure that these leaders are held accountable? Or we are just overlooking things and then, have proper blueprints and praise ourselves that we have proper blueprints for agriculture, but the implementation is zero. I must appreciate KD's observation about the Kenyan youth population. That is who we are. Except now, the passion for agriculture, you saw the sophisticated, the hardworking IT gurus, the smart Kenyan youth, that's who we are. But now, you cannot tell us, that population you saw in Nairobi, you cannot tell them to get a hoe or get a tractor or do this and go and practice agriculture in the village. It will be an abomination in the country. So we have to go ahead and then sensitize the youth of Kenya on the importance of agriculture, on how we must participate in agriculture, even with kitchen gardens, even with something, we must start from somewhere. We must have the passion to be driven so that we have enough produce in the region that is able to be preserved well. Like Comrade Rugarama has talked about the chain, like how from the production to how we now deliver the food produce to the market, and how we now preserve some for the future. I really appreciate the contributions from Comrade Cade and Comrade Rugarama, and this was a very wonderful session, and I've really learned a lot. I'm proud of you and my sister. Thank you so much.
Okay, just before, Wayne is still with me here.
Yes.
When we come to Kenya, for example, I just want to know how many youth in Kenya do cherish and love agriculture? Vis-a-vis what Ndugu KD here talks about, the futurenomics and the Wakanda versus the Wakanda. You notice that even when we come to Kenya, all of us are thinking, because we have accepted and agreed we are in a global village. What is connecting us and what is making this village a one village is the generation that we have of the IT generation, the Internet of Things. So all of us are scampering and running into IT. We are eventually becoming robots. Artificial intelligence is overtaking us. In Kenya, for example, when you talk about agriculture, how many would you get to? And they will tell you, yes, we need to use our technology, we need to use all the information and everything that we have to build agriculture. Are they even in agriculture? Would you speak to anybody about agriculture and they would listen to you and they would follow you and they would love what you're saying to them?
I'll say 10% of the youth population in Kenya. That's one. And we must also appreciate technology. I love technology. And technology can help us reach markets, can help us be innovative and know which innovative agricultural ideas to come up with. That is okay. But 10% of the youth population are saying Kenya would listen if I sat them down to speak about agriculture. The other day, I was with a friend of mine and we were discussing about a county in Kenya that has a ministry we have a ministry of culture in a county, and it is so dormant. It has not done anything. It is not vibrant. And we were just wondering
a dormant ministry of agriculture. A dormant ministry of agriculture.
Yes.
Wow, that's a disaster.
Yes, yes. Every let's say we have counties in Kenya, 47 counties. Let's say departments. Every county has a department of agriculture. And these departments are so, not ministries, these departments are so idle and dormant that you never hear from them. You rarely hear from them. Every year in Kenya, we have these sessions where Kenyans come together to portray what they produce, what a county can produce, you know, and what they've been able to achieve. And most of the times, most county tents, let's say tent 1, tent 2 for this county, are always empty. They have nothing to show in the agricultural sector. They have nothing to show that they produce and can be marketed and sold. We've had such programs in Kenya. It is a big challenge in Kenya. Agriculture and passion go hand in hand. Blueprints are there, budget allocations are there, policies are there. Is the passion there?
So how have those counties, it's amazing, Winnie, how have those counties helped President Kenyatta and Deputy President Ruto to fulfill the 4 big agenda, and of course one of which is actually food security? How have those now managed to help the president to ensure that there is food security in the country, to give accountability to the leadership of Muigai Kenyatta for this particular term, 2017-2022?
Like we've said before, one of the cancers that is eating Africa is corruption, and we try as much as we can, you know, to have audit and accountabilities and everything in the country. But I'm just sad. I feel like out of the budget allocation, the president has done his part. The president and the deputy do their part of budget allocation, but we must. Our senators, at the end of the day, the people who are supposed to oversee the 47 governors are the senators in the country. We must have vibrant senators in the country who should make sure they oversee the work of the governors and give proper reports and hold the governors accountable. Because that is the work of the senators. What are the senators doing in Kenya? Are we holding them accountable? Why are we holding governors accountable? We must also hold senators accountable for not overseeing and for not performing their duties and letting the president know what's happening, but, you know, and giving proper reports for that matter. But I'm very sad. I feel like out of the budget that the president allocates in counties for agriculture, I feel the output is 30%. That's what if I could, you know.
Thank you very much, Ogweno Winnie, the president of the Pan-African Women's Congress in Kenya. Thank you very much. Back to studios, Winnie. I beg your pardon. Winnie is in Kenya, and then with me here is Rachel. One of the writers, a man confesses, his name is Tim Howard. He wrote a book called The Prisoners of Geography, and he confesses in his book and says, if you have a developed DRC, then you can be able to feed the continent of Africa. We have the DRC, and we talk about the DRC. One of the things that we talk about the DRC is the population that it adds to the community. You had Kade here talk about the DRC, and of course we talk about all the things. We think, just like the world knows, but can we, what should this generation do? I'm only thinking, can we go our way? Because we know very well that there is somebody out there who does not want to see that Democratic Republic of Congo that can feed the continent of Africa. What we need to do to ensure that even when they do not want, we still can produce the food for ourselves.
Comrade Jagenda, one of the things that I labor to talk about from consistently is the fact that Africa is in a crisis not of resources, but it is in a crisis of visionaries. This crisis is so deep, it is so intense, it's so sustained that it has held us captive these many years. I'm at a place where I really don't want to go very much into figures and statistics because they will not take us places. You were saying that there are people in this world who are very interested in making sure that Africa does not realize its potential. It is true. However, I also like to return to the historical context, and that informs where we are. The very same group of people were not excited to see African nations emerge from colonialism. But it did happen, didn't it? It happened because the will of the visionaries of that era was unshakable and unrelenting. Those are the kinds of people that we need to take us from where we are to where we need to go. Those people, the founding fathers of the African state, even if much of it is still theoretical, they were people who were very extremely clear about where we need to be. In their thinking, the African salvation would come from a united effort. In fact, there was a certain group, and I think that is, it was referred to at the time as the Casablanca group. And those ones had a very radical agenda for Africa. They said, look, the only way forward is to really bring all our resources together, have this super state where there is thorough integration, where there is a common pot of ideas, resources, visions, dreams, and so on and so forth. In the end, because this predated the OAU, in the end, what they called the Monrovia Group at the time, they were in for the present arrangement, which arrangement has not served us well. The present arrangement is for a loose coalition where governments kind of agree to relate, and I have to say in most cases, out of convenience. There are no really solid commitments. There are no solid resources applied to whatever is not very palatable. What I am trying to say is that the space that has been left from those giants of thinking, of the foundation that we need to take us forward, is our problem to date. Obstacles are going nowhere. If you heard the Secretary of State the other day, the American Secretary of State, I think it was yesterday, he was very vocal, very bitter with China that wants to occupy its space in the world. He said America will not allow it. He was unequivocal, and this is a diplomat. But the language was pointed. It was sharp. They are prepared to go to war to preserve their place at the helm of the world order.
That's where they want to be.
So we are saying, if they'll do that to China, and they said, look, China is the latest threat to their political order. They say now they have the resources, they have the brain power, they have the numbers, they have the focus, they have everything it takes to finally take on America and overthrow it. And America says they are going to fight to the death. That is really what they're saying. What I'm trying to say, and this really, I'm going roundabout to say that we are where we are because we lack people of that variety in the present era. People who say that even when people will be resisted for saying, even as Gaddafi was resisted, Gaddafi was very much for a super state, a state where the resources, the advantages of the different regions are harvested for our common good, where our people are again empowered to see that the salvation of the African will not come from without, it will come from within. Those sorts of people are the ones that will take us the distance concerning all these policies. Africa is not lacking for human resource. It is not lacking for brain power. It is not lacking for experience. It is lacking for vision. People who understand that vision is very costly, those people are no longer there. The visionaries of today, if it gets expensive in terms of pressure from Ndugu Watafiri the other day, he was talking on the occasion of the African Day, and he talked about the fact that the neo-colonialists are bent on preserving their order and that Africa should do what it takes to make sure that this is not so. But this pool of thinking has not been cultivated. Ndugu Semakula, nothing happens by accident. We cannot expect to realize these goals and objectives, however noble and however good, without a deliberate, without a sustained cultivation of the minds. You're talking about people who no longer think agriculture is the modern way. Those people have been allowed to go into that place because there's a space. No one is, ideology has been left alone. Common thinking has been left alone. This vision that we have for ourselves is not even in common. We are talking about East Africa, but the vision of East Africa may not be the vision of West Africa. It may not be the vision of South Africa. It may not be the vision of North Africa. So how are we going to harness the resources of peoples who are at odds in their thinking? It is impossible. So however much is applied in the way of resources, no matter how much we apply in the way of intellectual power, if it is not common, we cannot move forward. Okay. That is our problem.
The time is running up, and we just left with about 15 minutes. 15 minutes, yes. Let's now start summing this up and see why it takes us. Come to the conversation again. You've heard from Winnie in Kenya. You've heard from Nduguru KD or B.
Very beautiful submissions, I must say. Let me just commence with what my sister here, Rachel, has reiterated. The position of America as far as China is concerned. You see, if you cannot be able as a country to unleash the jackals onto another country, like we know for a fact that it would be a disaster for America to, they can't even think about it. They have just failed to go to North Korea. You think they can move their troops into the Republic of China?
But you see, the posturing is also very good. To actually say, we're coming for you, we will respond militarily.
I'm coming to that.
It's because they want to claim their space.
They are even failing to do anything about Russia, apart from trying to, and I think they misread the young man, the president. And they have paid a very heavy price now. The Ukrainians are paying a very heavy price, and the entire world is falling into that quagmire, even where we are not party. The point I'm trying to make is that certainly, apart from the threats that can be thrown once in a while, left and right, I don't think that America can in any meaningful way hurt China. These are powers that must sit and negotiate. You know, what is in here for me, what is in there for you, you know, that kind of stuff. And I think the reason as to why they are in for a shock is because a country like China, a country like India, a country, you know, they are certainly, without saying it loudly, supporting Russia. You know, they can afford even to establish an alternative global economy, and they will move. So I want to leave that one at that. Let me say, as far as nutrition and food security is concerned, and I've listened to my colleagues here, I must thank them. These are very beautiful, well thought out views. Africa is in the preparation to set up what we call a Pan-African Food Security Center, something like that. Now, this is what they have resolved to do, and it is in the pipeline. Now, that gives you the importance that they attach as a body to nutrition and food security. Certainly, we know that we are against very big global forces, because in the arena of big power organizations who are controlling the so-called fertilizers, the seeds, and all sorts of things that go into production of, into agriculture, then you are, and you see, you must also go back and look at the support that America, the so-called partnership, the American partnership, the Department of Agriculture with the African Union. The inability by Africa as a continent to sponsor research, and Comrade Kaid, I think, talked about that. Then the inability also to achieve cohesion, which my sister Rachel has talked about, among the countries of Africa so quickly. Of course, we have moved the distance. I can assure you that even the members of Monrovia Group, and Rachel was talking about them, like the late Kambarega Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, he went to the grave of Osejefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and apologized and said, you were right and I was wrong. When I supported the Monrovia bloc, we should have moved with the Casablanca group. You know, at the time when the vocal Osejefo was telling the members in 1963 that if we move out of this conference without one army, one currency, and one country, we run a risk of getting very comfortable at the moment in our small countries, and then we go along with the flag independence. He was right. But let me say that we need research centers in agriculture as early as yesterday. And this we must achieve without necessarily relying on the support by the foreign powers. Because truth of the matter is, when you look at the collaboration between the USA and the African Union, and when you, because I took time, like I said, to listen to how they were making their submissions, you can see now the kind of, and there are other meetings which are, because the Secretary of State has called organizations to do with agriculture, global organizations to do with agriculture on the African continent in particular, in Washington. They are having a meeting. Now, this is a platform, from my view, this is a platform, and this is the American way of doing things. It's a platform to engage these organizations, to persuade them with bits and pieces of money here and there, and show them how bad Russia is in as far as their activities in Ukraine is concerned. So they are using that one as a campaign tool. They have done that before. I'm not surprised that they are doing it this time around. But suffice also to look at the food chain processes. That the moment the crop is planted in the African soils, and the time it is consumed, in between there is quite a lot that we lose, and we have got to do a lot of soul searching and a lot of research. You see, the moment we do not have to, the moment we fail to tame those losses which we have projected at 35 to 40 something post-harvest losses, the moment we do not work on the inputs, the very inputs, the seeds and what maintains the seed to grow properly, we are running a risk of not being able to control the nutrition and food security. Look at it this way. When you look at the kind of food that we eat, even obesity, by the way, the obesity levels are on the increase on the African continent. I happen to have my children, they have gone through one of these so-called good schools. We hustle. Not that we have the ability really to take the children there, but we try. What do you do? We really fight. And I look at the children when they pass by me. I feel like grabbing one of them and say, well, "What are you feeding on? I mean, this size P5, P1, and the fella is a giant. You know, so
we never saw that in our days.
I can assure you that the obesity is part of the problem, and we are. Well, you look at the kind of food, Jumia, this
fast foods, basically.
The fast food sector on the African continent in urban centers is on the increase.
Yeah,
we must, as a matter of policy and the country, check that.
Okay. We're running out of time and just 9 minutes. Let me come to you, Ndugu KD, in about 3 minutes. Let's hear from you. Finally, where are we? And of course, as we close this down, come to the conversation again.
I really want to emphasize solutions that will excite the younger generation. Just as they say, when you teach a woman, you teach a family, you teach a community. Well, I say when we excite the younger generation, we excite generations. So therefore, I'm going to go right through this list of practical inputs for the younger generation. Number one, we must make the whole economic production sector exciting to young people. Emphasize the high-tech aspects of this, such as get into drones, get into making apps that are for agriculture, high-tech policies in microbiology and biotechnologies that are not about gene alteration. I'm very much against gene alteration. We need to emphasize organic production and the resultant high value export value of these organics. Communications initiatives need to be launched where we're producing stories, films, videos that highlight the heroes, such as the great late Professor Wangari Maathai, the Nobel Peace Prize winner from Kenya, whose name should be on the lips of every young person on the African continent for generations. We need to emphasize high quality jobs in production and distribution, especially rural production. Of course, rural production must also be accompanied by remote distribution of renewable energies. And so the renewable energy sector must come into play. And I say this is one sector where we can get young people excited about these high-tech jobs of the future. I think our communications should always de-emphasize the hoe. We need to put the agricultural production of the hoe away and replace that with a whole bunch of other different technologies. Rural innovation hubs could be set up to where young people travel to the rural areas, stay for 1 week, 3 weeks, or maybe relocate there to be part of these innovation hubs that are being built across the continent. We need to emphasize international travel education, something that always excites young people. New housing should be built in these rural areas that will attract these young people at the beginning of their careers, media production facilities and suburban locations to tie the urban and the rural areas together, emphasize the potential of aquaculture as well as marine resources as the next generation of African agricultural output, productivity, and I would suggest supremacy. We're talking about the Wakanda future. A couple of more, invite young intellectuals to create their visionary plans of how this would develop. Let's not just always rely on us older heads and Pan-Africans. Let's open our ears up to hear what the young people envision, how they would develop it. Let's take traditional African medicine to a level of hundreds of trillions of dollars or hundreds of trillions of shillings in international market value. And I'm talking about Kenya shillings, not Uganda shillings. And lastly, let's get this party started as soon as possible. I am wonderfully impressed by this group of people you have assembled for today's discussion. I'm highly excited. As you can tell, I have pages and pages of notes that I will be translating into a chapter of my upcoming book, Futurenomics 2.0, the Wakanda future versus the fourth industrial revolution. Much gratitude to you, my comrades, for this beautiful discussion this morning.
Thank you very, very, very much, Katie Obi, in the United States where you are. We thank you so much for having allowed to join us and, of course, for giving us this time and your very brilliant thoughts on something that you're so passionate about. Once again, Asante sana, hongera. Thank you very much. To you, Winnie Ogweno, finally from you in 1.5 minutes.
I'll just say thank you so much for the host, and I think going forward as a youth of this country, I should take the initiative of preaching the importance of agriculture and food security in the country, and we should, as Pan-Africanists, find how to hold different counties and governors accountable for especially for the Department of Agriculture budget allocation, and see what we can do and move forward as a nation. And also, one thing we are preaching here in Kenya right now is the blue economy, the aquamarine, and everything in the country. we should keep preaching the blue economy, much as we're emphasizing on the other side of agriculture. And as the East African community, let's proceed with the proper infrastructure we want to put in place, the Northern Corridor and the Southern Corridor, South Gauge Railway. Let's emphasize this. Let's make sure this takes place. Let's tap food from South Sudan, preserve the post-harvest, the post-harvest food, and make sure we have reserves in East Africa, that if we have a country having an issue with food security, we could always speak from the reserve and take to the particular country and feed our population. Let's preach about nutrition. Let's preach about the importance of eating healthy. Let's stay a healthy population, because when we are healthy, then we are able to be very active and liberate our economy. And most importantly, we make sure we preach the innovative ideas back to the Mama Mboga, back in the village, to make sure these technologies we have as youth here in Nairobi are able to reach the wananchi back in the village, and we improve the agricultural sector and bring back the glory of Africa and liberate Africa. Thank you so much for hosting me. It's good to have brilliant people and my seniors and elders, and to get very educative insights from people. Thank you.
Asante sana dada Ogweno Winnie, the president of the Pan-African Women Congress in Kenya. Tunakushukuru sana. Thank you very much for your time, and we pray with you. And we just wish you the very best over the season that you are going through until the 9th of August this year, when you will get the polls and choose whom you want to be your next president for the next 5 years. Tunakushukuru, hongera. Thank you very much. Very good.
Asante sana, nashukuru sana kwa Uganda, nawapenda sana Uganda, na I wish you the best in Uganda, the best climate, the part of Africa, and of course I think the best country with the best vegetation in the region. Thank you so much.
Asante sana. Thank you, Winnie, just right there. Your final thoughts in in just a few seconds. We need to be here. We have 60 seconds.
Yes, even as we conclude this discussion, I'm of the opinion that we must urgently rediscover our unity of mind and purpose.
Okay, thank you very much. Comrade Rugarama?
When Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, in his years concluding his life, said in his writings that African Union, Organization of African Union, had been captured from within and from without, and that the enemy is within, it should not be enough reason for us to resign. Let us ask questions and accountability from the African Union, because it is the only body we have that brings the entire continent together and will be part of the solution.
Thank you, all of you. Rachel Takali, a Pan-Africanist, and of course, one of our panelists here at the Pan-African Friday. Thank you very much. And Ndogo Comrade Rugarama, also one of our panelists here at the Pan-African Friday, and of course, the chairman of the Pan-African Movement Uganda chapter. Thank you. Thank you, Winnie Ogweno Winnie, the president of the Pan-African Women Congress in Kenya. We thank you so much for the 2 hours that you've endured with us. And finally, thank you so much, Makedi Obi, another very passionate Pan-Africanist from the United States, just right there. I thank all of you. And of course, on behalf of the team, Akol Mandia Mazima and James Mututa, who have not been with us, wherever they are, of course, serving. None of them is sick, none of them has an emergency, none of them has a problem. They're just not here, serving elsewhere. We thank you so much. And of course, thanking our producer and the management. My name is Jagen Nasemakola Ziksoka, wishing you all the best for the weekend. Shalom and good morning. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Greetings to my sister Winnie. I hope you copied down my